Welcome to our podcast, Desi Guys. This is where me and my co-host, Joe, my name's Abhi, we talk about the brown experience living in the West. We talk about all things fitness, dating, health. That's pretty much it. We'll be probably doing this every week. On Sundays will be our uploads, and we'll do that for as long as we can. So this is our first episode. Today's topic, we'll be talking about that very soon. First up, here from my co-host, Joe.
Thank you, Abhi. I feel like a talk show right now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Abhi. Guys, my name's Joe. Me and Abhi, we go way back to university, and we're both I guess from similar backgrounds. Both Indian, and to the people, I guess, listening to this podcast, I'm guessing, a predominant demographic is going to be, the Indian male, trying to, either navigate, their dating life and their career in a Western country, or maybe it's I guess someone back home that's trying to understand what it's like, before they come over to a Western country. But so hope you find today's episode insightful. We're gonna talk about what we're going to talk about today, or
today's topic will be pretty much talking about our dating mistakes, things we've done over the last 30 25 years on this planet. I think in terms of, before we dive right into it, let's talk about why we think this podcast is probably a good idea, and digging a little bit deeper about what we're going to be talking about. So I think Joe and I, we've been shooting the shit, talking about women, dating, psychology, fitness, career, we talk about a lot of stuff. So we thought, might as well record our shit, put it up online, see if anyone else, has a similar experience. Maybe they can describe their experience, maybe they can share their lessons and learned. So I think this would be a great place for essentially us two brown guys to talk about our lives and how, and all the mistakes we've made, all the lessons we've learned, and share some of those experiences. And vice versa. It'd be great to hear from the audience or the listeners, if you had similar experiences, if you had better or worse, or something was different. So I think it would just be a good place, a good location for us to talk about the brown perspective, because my name's Abhi, as I said earlier. I'm from India. I was born in India, and I came here, and I've been living here in Australia for a long time. And Joe, you're also, if I'm not mistaken, Indian.
From the motherland.
That's it. So yeah, I think so. That's the reason why we're starting this podcast. Do you have anything else to add?
Nah. Hey, we just want to shoot the shit and record the conversations. Hopefully everyone listening gets something of value out of it. In the eternal struggle of being a brown guy in a different country, man.
That's it. Yeah. So I think that's good enough of a reason. I think we've described what this podcast is about and why we're doing it. I think the next part of it, really, this whole next 30 minutes or 40 minutes, we're going to share some of our stories of dating, of making mistakes, of screwing up,
and spicy stories.
And then we're going to try to roast each other a little bit, maybe even just have fun, poke fun at ourselves to see how what the key takeaways are, being a brown guy and making those mistakes, and not just being a brown guy. I think just being any guy. As a guy, you sort of make all these stupid mistakes. You're dating and you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, but especially when you're brown, because let's be honest. There's a couple of you fuckers listening to this podcast right now that give the rest of us a really bad rap. You know what I mean? The fucking creepy Rajpinders of the world that give, the upstanding Abhis and the Joes a bad rap, because we're out here trying to hustle, trying to get these white women, and, they're just not having a bar of it. So, hopefully we can exchange some of our not so fun dating experiences and, fuck ups so that some of the guys listening to this podcast don't make the same mistakes, man, because we gotta band together, we gotta help each other out.
Couldn't agree more. I think one of the reasons why brown guys in the first place really they kind of suck at the dating side of things, and no offense to brown people, it's probably because in India, and even growing up in an Indian household, you're probably not taught, or at least not imparted the wisdom, the skills. You don't even observe sometimes healthy patterns of what a relationship should look like, between your parents. So I think you sort of grow up in this weird environment where you don't really know how things ought to be. And everything that you do learn is like watching movies, TV shows, maybe your friends talking shit. So really you have no proper education or no proper form of, there's no proper way to learn certain things about women and dating and life in general. So I think that's probably why brown guys suck more than the white people. And this whole show is not going to be brown versus white. We're just shooting the shit here, so it's easier to sort of describe, how we think about these things.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to start as well, right? It's like, I think family and how that ties into dating and dating experience. And like, again, like I'll be curious to know, like, if you guys want to put something in the comments around like how family tied into your dating experience. But like dude, for like me growing up, like there was no like education into what like, how to date or how to go about getting dates. Like I wish, there's shit that I wish that my dad had actually taught me, where he was like, hey, like, look, here's how not to get a date. Here's how to approach women. Like, here's how to hold an open conversations. Like, again, just things that I wish like I had gotten in the way of, guidance and education from my parents. Probably something that I'll do for my kids, is definitely like before they go into high school is just sit them down and kind of give them the A to Z, and not like some cheesy sex talk, but actually talk to them about like the experience of what they're about to walk into, which is, there's going to be this opposite sex or same sex. I don't know, like shit, like kind of digging myself a hole here at this point. But yeah, dude, like the original point, I guess, is just family. And I think that lack of, that lack of sort of education from like my dad, I guess, would probably be where it would come from. Or I guess if I'd had an older brother or something, it would have been interesting to see if like I would have gotten the talk and some guidance and some counseling. But I guess the lack of that basically meant it was like, diving into the deep end and trying to work it out, and honestly just making mistakes literally from 13 all the way through to, I mean, shit, I'm still fucking making mistakes, right? And I'm like almost, I'm 27 going on 28. So that's a 14-year education in dating. And I think I'm just getting the hang of it.
Yeah.
And that's like, well over a decade. So I think, ties into family. I'm just rambling at this point. Abhi, what's your thoughts, dude?
I was actually going to say, like, as we're talking about family, and you were obviously mentioning how you're making mistakes for a long time. Maybe it might be a good idea to like really quickly do a quick summary of your life, like background, where you're born, just everything about yourself, Joe, and then I'll do the same for myself.
Easy. Born in the motherland. Moved when I was 5. Went to New Zealand. Grew up in New Zealand. Did high school in New Zealand. All that fun stuff. Moved to Sydney. Living in Sydney now. That's kind of the very short version. Yeah, family. Look, mum and dad, both Indian, South Indian, lived in South India all their life. So very much, I guess from that world. Mum's Hindu, dad's Christian, which made for a pretty interesting upbringing. A bit of a blend of things. So I'm always trying to work out, like, I remember when I was growing up, I was literally trying to work out how Krishna fit into like the Holy Trinity, you know what I mean? And vice versa, trying to figure out how Jesus fit into the 26 different Hindu gods. But, that's sort of my background. How about you, Abhi?
I think in terms of like myself, I was born in India like back in 1994. So I came to Australia when I was 7. So we initially came to sort of Sydney, and then we moved back and forth. So my family, I've got my mum, my dad, and I've got a younger brother. And so, we came to Australia. My brother was born here. And so went back and forth between Brisbane and Sydney. And then I grew up in this household where my family, they had lots of issues. Obviously, when you're immigrating to another country, there's all these complications and problems and challenges. So I completed my primary school, my high school, and my university here. And just towards the end of my high school, my parents essentially got divorced. So yeah, like my parents split up. It's been a couple of years. Everything's all good now. But just yeah, I think that's the life experience that I've had in terms of seeing my family, how they've navigated their relationship. And what else about me? I went to Macquarie University. That's right. Shout out to Macquarie. Awesome place. Highly recommended. What else? I also do work in sales now. So I'm not going to reveal which company, but it's a pretty good company. Yeah. And by the way, and by the way, I think Joe, if I'm not mistaken, you also work in sales.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm a sleazy salesman. No, I'm kidding. So yeah. Me and Abhi both work in corporate sales. Actually, I'm gonna dive in there with the questions. I mean, maybe we're kind of diving into the deep end here, but how did your experience of seeing your family go through that tie into your perspectives on dating, relationships, maybe insecurities around that as well? I mean, where did that sort of leave you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I reckon we could make an entire like podcast episode just on this. But to really quickly summarize, I think is that seeing my parents and seeing their dysfunctional relationship and seeing the mistakes that they made, it made me firstly confused as to how I should manage my relationships. But upon greater reflection and like journaling and a little bit of meditation and all that, all that fun self-help stuff that we'll get into later on, I was able to sort of like find out like these are like 7 or 10 things my parents did correctly in their relationship, and these are like 10, 20, 30 things that they did wrong. And so like for me now is like as I'm navigating the world, I'm sort of always thinking like I need to do the right things my parents were doing, but also avoid the wrong things our parents weren't were doing. So if I can just do the opposite of what my parents do, I can pretty comfortably, I think, have a pretty good relationship with my future partner. And I think I also don't want to like shit all of my parents, because I think my parents did the best they could. I think a lot of things people don't realize is that these days we as like the younger generation have access to Google and self-help, and we have all the time in the world to really reflect and think and ponder about the meaning of life. But our families, our parents, our grandparents, they didn't have this luxury that we do. So they didn't really have the time or the patience to date and to like interact with meet people and reflect and then so I think I can see why my parents had those issues. I don't blame them. I don't like I get where they're coming from. But I think so I think that's pretty much the whole experience, and we'll probably talk more about this in the future episode. Like what about yourself, man? Because I know your family, they're still in New Zealand if I'm not mistaken. So like, how was their relationship when how did you observe like some of the lessons that you took away from your family's parents, marriage and stuff?
Dude, it's kind of crazy. Like, I actually didn't even realize that divorce was a concept till I was about 14. Like 14 or 15. I'm not even kidding. Like, that word wasn't even like in my vocabulary. Like, I actually didn't even know what that word meant, because I thought, like, just from observing my parents, was like, that's what a marriage would look like. It's just you get married and you stay married through thick and thin. And so for me, when I was exposed to this idea of divorce, it was like a bit of a shock almost, where I was like, oh, so like not every marriage is like, my parents' marriage. It was a little naive, to be honest, but yeah, like my perspective's been, I guess, just different, which is just kind of seeing two people that just kind of stuck it out, very sort of old school. And
So, digging into dating stories, this should be good. I'll start off first. When I was, there's so many stories to pick from. I don't know which one to do. Okay, I'll go with the one which was
the worst one.
The worst one. I'll go with the worst one. The first one always should be the most juiciest. So this is when I was 19. I had just moved out, and I was living obviously at home, just like all Indians. But I decided to move out when I was 19, shortly around the time my parents were getting divorced. I thought, let's move on to campus in Macquarie. So I moved out, and I moved into this wonderful 5-bedroom with like share house with lots of different people, and there, in the downstairs room, I met this girl. She was like the most beautiful Indian chick ever. I won't say the name, obviously, privacy reasons, but she was hot. She was like fucking fire, like spicy chicken, you know, like just hot.
Wait. Can we give her a nickname? Like, can we call her like let's call her Latika.
Latika,
Right?
Let's call
Okay.
Latika.
Right.
Obviously, she is amazing. She's hot. She's from like this. She's from like a part of India that like then you know the big city, you know the city of Bollywood, from a wealthy family, obviously. And so I had like a total crush on her. Like, you know, like from the second I saw her, I was like I thought she was the most beautiful woman ever. At least, you know, at that point. So over the course of the next, I'd say 12 months, I essentially did, I was like what's the right way to say it? I was not a bitch, but I would say I was like a friend zone slash, just a very nice guy that would do anything and everything for her. That's probably the best way to put it.
Sounds like a bitch.
Yeah, I guess you could say being a bit of a bitch. But yeah, no, essentially I was so interested. I was like, you know, if she wanted to like hang out, I would like cancel my plans to hang out. If she wanted, like, she needed help with laundry, I'd fucking help her out with laundry. Like, I would like, you know what I mean? Like, if she wanted to go out at like night, and I had a car, obviously. She was from India, so she was like staying in this apartment. So I had my own car, a fantastic Toyota Camry, like 1998, like, you know, the old school, like, you know, like classic, yeah. So I would have this car, and I would drive her. We'd go to restaurants, and we'd like talk about a certain thing, and I would listen to her talk about shit. You know what I mean? Like, I would be the guy that was just there for her. And fast forward about 12 months, and she's essentially dating this guy, and I need to get over this because you know what happened at this time? I actually failed units at Macquarie because I wasn't studying enough. Like, I literally failed units. I got myself into like a few extra $1,000 of debt because I was spending time, you know, with her so much. And so I knew at this point, like I was self-aware enough to know that I should overcome this shit. I need to get out of the friend zone, or I need to like disengage. So what I did was I did the most classic thing every Indian does. I wrote a letter. I wrote a letter. I wrote not a 1 page, a 2 page. I wrote a fucking 12 page, I think, letter.
That's a book, bro.
Yeah, I was literally like a book. I had quotes from like Bollywood movies. I had like a reference to like Bollywood shit. I was like, like the classic kuch kuch hota hai, like the old Shah Rukh Khan references. I was doing all of that, and I was doing more. And I had written like a 12-page thing where I was like, oh, it's so cringy when I think back. I remember one part of it where I wrote, in the future, I hope you and I would have these kind of kids. And this is what we would do after we got married. So I was like full, like, oh man, the cringiest shit in the world. And so I wrote it down, and I essentially I gave it to her, and she had an understandable reaction. She was like, look, I don't see you the same way, and like, obviously you're a good friend. By the way, she was like 2 to 2.5 years older than me. So I was 19, she was 21. So obviously I completely got rejected, and then I think like 3 months after that I moved out. Fucking hilarious. And that whole experience taught me like a couple of things. First thing was like, never neglect your responsibilities and your duties. If you're a student at university, focus on your task at hand. If you're working as if you're a job, focus. Whatever you're supposed to be doing, do that. Number one. The second thing is understand what the way to communicate your emotions effectively is. Understand the psychology behind being friend zoned. Like, it's if you're being friend zoned, like 9 out of 10 times it's your fault as a guy. Like, fundamentally, you should know how to actually indicate your interest very early on, and you should be able to like flirt, or at least escalate it to the point that you're highlighting what you feel about her directly to her, instead of hiding your emotions and feelings and then trying to be her friend, and then later on, try to build that sexual chemistry, whatever. So that's the second thing. Like, you really need to learn how to navigate that dating communication. How do you avoid friend zone? It's your job as a guy to learn that and to do that effectively. The third thing is, and this is I'm kind of proud of myself, is like, you should know how to pull off the band-aid. Like, even though this is the most cringiest thing I ever did, and I'm obviously talking about it on a podcast, so clearly I'm over that whole experience. But like, even at that point, I knew that if this works out, worst case scenario, I'm okay with that. Like, I'd rather rip off the band-aid and create this permanent cringe-worthy, uncomfortable story rather than wasting 2, 3, 4 years. I think I only wasted like 9 to 10 months, maybe 12 months at max. And then I moved out to a different house like a couple of months later. So that's the first story. Hopefully it wasn't too bad. Your turn, Joe. Tell me about your shit.
Dude, that's really interesting though. Like, I feel like a lot of people listening to this are probably going to resonate with that, because there's always that one where like it's like School of Hard Knocks, right? Like you do like the dumbest shit, and then in hindsight you look back and you're like, really? Because I had something very similar, right? At like 16, I was like 15 going on 16, and it was, again, I'm not going to name names, but it was just someone that I went to church group with, right? Because I grew up a good Christian boy. I was an altar boy, held the cross, I sang in the choir.
No priests?
Yeah, shut the fuck up. There's this one time in Christian camp. No, listen, like, so, like, again, like, I met this girl, and I was a little smitten, right? And we were family friends. And similar to you, like, I kind of didn't know how to get that message across. Like, I kind of didn't know how to sort of express that I was into her. And, I did some really cringy shit, like I remember like one summer I went away and I came back and she had a boyfriend, and the boyfriend happened to be this other guy from camp, right? Like church camp and church group. And like this guy was, he played guitar and he was like smooth and he was funny. And man, like I hated on him so hard, like so hard, right? And for the next, like, I kid you not, like I'd probably say like 12 to 18 months, I was literally like hanging around being her best friend or trying to be her best friend, not really wanting to just be her best friend. I wanted to be a hell of a lot more. And, I'd go over to her house, I would hang out with her, we'd watch movies together, we'd talk, she'd tell me about her relationship problems, I'd listen and pretend I gave a fuck, and it's just like, it was just that until I reached a point where I was like, I was literally like, man, this is fucking sad. You know what I mean? But like, again, like as far as this is how cringy it was. Like I actually asked her out after she had started dating this other guy. And I was like, hey, do you want to go watch a movie together? But the way I said it, I was so like terrified. She was clearly like, I don't think you just want to go watch a movie. And again, it was just like, man, it was just like the cringiest thing. And I think for me, what I took away from that is, like, you'll know if she's into you. Like, I know now when a girl's into me. And if I sense that she's not into me, then like, I just don't find that sexy. It's like, well, there's no mutual attraction. And in that situation, it's like, hey, like, I'm not gonna, like, I'll show you some interest and see what the response is. But if there's no response, like, to chase someone and not be chased back is not a sexy thing, unless you're into that, unless you got some like weird like chasing fetish, then that's your own thing. But like that was just one of the big things that like it took me fucking years to learn that, dude. Like I kid you not, like from trying to ask someone out that already had a boyfriend and then deciding to step back and just be her friend and wait around till the opportunity maybe presented itself.
Going back to what you were saying, Joe, like, so what are some of the key takeaways again from that whole experience that you had?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the big one for me was mutual attraction is sexy. And if there isn't mutual attraction, maybe make a bit of an effort to show that you're attracted, because maybe the other person's just shy.
Yeah.
Right. But if you make an effort to show that you're interested and they still don't express that mutual attraction, that's okay. And in fact, that's a good sign, because it just shows that this person is not interested in you. And it's probably not worthwhile trying to pursue that. That was probably one of my biggest lessons from that very early dating experience, is sometimes she's just going to be a friend, bro. And that's okay. And sometimes that's better to just leave it that way, because if she's not into you, she's not into you. And I think the other thing as well was, I guess, this whole idea of just continuing to work on myself. Because if I again looked at myself back then, you know, and I put on the lens of just personal responsibility, I wasn't who I needed to be back then to command that level of attraction, right? And it's okay to admit that, and it's okay to actually, it's okay to be okay with that. And again, it took me a long time to sort of work my way through that and accept that to earn that attraction, I actually have to put in some work on myself, physically, socially, emotionally, career-wise, you know, to earn that attraction. So those are probably my two big things. But what sort of came to you as well as I was sort of going through that story?
I think listening to your story really reminded me of like the similar experience that I had, right? Obviously, both of us had a thing for a girl that didn't have a thing for us. Both of us were chasing after a girl that probably already had a boyfriend, or at least were seeing someone else. I think it might be very common in the world to like as a guy to go after someone, and I'm sure it's very common to some of our listeners or, you know, some of the people, guys out there, like just you have this girl that you really, really like, and when you're young, you don't really know how to actually approach this person, how to actually engage, how to actually be a version of yourself that can actually attract and create this, you know, sexual attraction. Sexual attraction is probably the number one thing, as you sort of said, right? You have to feel something, that you'll know when they feel something for you, and when they respond in that way, and when you can engage in that, you know, I don't know what the fuck I was going to say, but like if you can essentially, like, if they're into you and you're into them, it will work out. That's my point, essentially. Yeah, all right. So we'll just go to like story number 2. I think this is like, good fast forward like another 2 or 3 years. I was probably 21, 22. Like by now, having learnt from some of the mistakes that I made early on with Latika, I was sort of improving myself. I was getting better with women. I was sort of going out a little bit more, talking to some people, and there was this girl that that also seemed to have a boyfriend. It seems to be a bit of a common theme, but actually, this is a very rare occurrence. Actually, so
Want to be home wrecker?
I don't know why. Maybe this every time I have a connection with someone, they seem to already have a boyfriend. It's not my fault, you know what I mean? But anyways, this girl that I saw, she had a boyfriend, and I didn't actually see her. Like we sort of engaged, not the right word. We sort of started communicating back and forth. Like I saw her around uni, and we'd be like, you know, like hanging out from time to time, and by now I sort of understood how to flirt, how to sort of indicate my interest. So I was complimenting her, I was like hitting on her, I was like, you know, a little bit of body language, a little bit of touching, you know, like we're like doing all that stuff, you know what I mean? But but of course we never ever crossed the line. And because she had a boyfriend, I was very aware that I didn't want to cross this ethical and moral, you know, this boundary. And so did she. Like she was also a little bit uncomfortable because clearly there was both felt something for one another. And even though we felt something, we were sort of like, you know, like heading in the direction where we might have crossed the boundary if that had continued. We never actually crossed the line. Anyway, so I'm rambling. My point was, with this chick, she essentially broke up with the guy later on, and you know we're about to sort of engage. We're about to sort of start making out. We're about to, like, you know, have a connection, whatever. About to like engage in something together. But before we did that, I actually didn't feel ready. Like I discounted myself. What I mean by that is, like, I actually didn't feel like I was in the right physical shape. Like I was physically not as good as I wanted to be. And I also felt a little bit guilty for maybe having played a part in, you know, like causing their breakup, whatever. And so those sort of two things, the fact that one, I was not comfortable with my body and I didn't think I was worthy of her. And the second thing was that I sort of felt a little bit guilty for maybe accidentally flirting with some guy's girlfriend. And those probably two things prevented anything from happening between us. And so that's probably the key takeaway from that whole experience, where you might see someone and they might already have someone, you know, a boyfriend, whatever. And even if you like them, if you chase after them, the personal integrity standpoint, like you will sort of feel shitty about yourself in some ways, shape or form. Even if nothing ever happened, you would still feel a little bit guilty. And the other thing was that the key takeaway for me was that even though I thought I was not good enough for her, like in some ways I thought, like, you know, I wasn't physically, I didn't have a six pack, I was still a little bit of a chubby kid, as you know, Joe. So because I felt like I wasn't physically in shape, I remember having a conversation with her. I literally said, you know, I can't wait till I get my six pack, and then we can have fun. I said something like that to her, and she was like, yeah, you should get it quickly. But even prior to that, like, she didn't really need me to have a six pack. Like, she didn't really care. Like, she just liked me. And like, I remember one time as well, like, she sort of said something like, she was like, she said like, you have great hair, or like, you know, you have like a great hairstyle. And I didn't think I had a great hairstyle. So I was like, nah, it's kind of shit. And I literally just like discounted myself. I literally, you know, like negatively negged myself. What's the word? I essentially self-deprecated myself to the point that she probably felt like I was having low self-esteem, or maybe she felt like I wasn't confident enough. And that is probably a really big takeaway for me, is that never discount yourself. If you're trying to improve yourself, keep improving. But when you're interacting with women, don't actually speak and be like, oh, you know, I'm not good enough, I'm not tall enough, I'm not, you know, XYZ enough. If you start highlighting your weaknesses and you start displaying self-deprecating humor to the point where people will be unattracted to you or lose attraction to you. And that probably the whole thing, that was the big takeaway for me from that second sort of experience.
Yeah, that's a really good point there as well, because I've caught myself doing that in the past. I distinctly had, I remember it was with a female colleague at work, and the topic of height came up, and I jokingly said, haha, you know, not something, you know, short guys like me.
Yeah.
And I distinctly remember she sort of turned around, she said, you're not short.
Yeah.
And but again, it's just that mental image that we sort of have in our minds, right? And it's like, I feel like as guys, like, you know, I think physical appearance and I guess our bodies are a really good one, where we're now in this world where, like, you go on Instagram, you see these like freaks that are just in amazing shape. Yeah. And you know, you see in movies like half of fucking Bollywood, they're like juiced out of their minds, right? Like these unattainable physiques naturally. And so we have this viewpoint that we have to have six packs before we get into bed. Like, we need to be like shredded pin cushions before she'll want to sleep with us. And the reality is, bro, is like I've been through the fitness journey before. Like, I've been super shredded. I've gotten ready for contests before where I've had like 5% body fat and like an 8-pack down to my dick. But like, that's not like, no girl really wants a guy that's, you know, that looks like some sort of cover model, right? Like the number of times I've had female friends tell me that, hey, like, I actually don't want to be with a guy that looks so damn good, because I just think that would be a bit of a pain to have to deal with all the female competition, you know? And so, yeah, and that's a whole nother topic altogether, Abhi. Yeah. And we had this chat earlier today. We were talking about, you know, how women pick mates and some of the stuff that we're reading at the moment. Yeah. Really good book, guys, by the way, for anyone listening. There's a good book on Audible called Why Women Have Sex. I would highly recommend you read that shit. It is it's fire. It's absolutely good book. But dude, like, I guess going back to your story, and tying into that, right, is, you know, I did something similar. You know, I did something similar with a girl that had a boyfriend, and I met her. It was at uni. Me and, just for context for everyone listening, me and Abhi actually lived in the same like uni campus, so that's how we knew each other. We'd bump into each other. But this was another like very beautiful Indian girl. I met her on a night out, and I remember actually I approached her and her friend. And I walked up to a friend. I actually disregarded this girl. We'll call her I don't know. Fuck, give me an Indian name.
I don't know, man. What's a good Indian name? Just go with like a generic name.
All right, let's
go with Davy or something. Davy.
No, you know what? We'll just call her the girl. Right?
The girl. We'll go with the girl. We'll think of some names next time.
We'll think of some names. Cool. But I approached the girl and her friend.
Yeah.
And I turned around to the friend and I just said, hey, like, who is your gorgeous friend? Right? Referring to this girl, this Indian girl that I was really into. And she thought that was hilarious. That, you know, I was pretending to be kind of dumbfounded and whatever. And she sort of almost grudgingly looked at me and looked really sad and said, oh, I have a boyfriend. And I was like, and it was really interesting because I was like, okay, like, that's cool. I'm glad you told me. But what ensued that night was, you know, she acted to me in a way that I was kind of surprised, and I was almost questioning. I was like, do you have a boyfriend? Because 5 minutes later, we were, you know, we were all, a bunch of us were in like a party bus heading to the bar, and she was sitting on my lap. And I was mildly confused, trying to figure out like, well, you just told me you had a boyfriend. And again, didn't see the red flags, didn't see the obvious signs that clearly this is someone that, you know, gets 3 drinks in them and all their values go out the window, and, you know, sense of loyalty goes out the window. And I was being, I mean, obviously, like, I should have been a better man too. Like, I'm not going to blame her. Like, you know, in that situation, I shouldn't have even entertained that. Like, as soon as she said she had a boyfriend, I should have been like, hey, I respect this other guy. I'm not even going to, like, talk to you. But I sort of played along, and I was a dickhead at the time as well. But, you know, fast forward a couple of months, like, we're hanging out, you know, she's still got a boyfriend. We're, you know, watching movies in my room together. You know, nothing may have happened, but again, like, she's still got a boyfriend. That's a bit of a compromising position for any woman to put herself in when she's in a committed relationship, right? And sure as hell, like, you know, the moment something went wrong with her relationship, and she had, like, she was on a little bit of a, you know, bit of a break. I think it was literally like 24 or 48 hours after, you know, they'd decided to walk, you know, take a bit of a break. I mean, I'm getting a message, I'm getting a call, and I'm getting asked, hey, can you come out? Me and the girls are out. And me then, of course, I jumped straight at it, right? But so, and we had this like fiery, crazy, you know, fling, few flings, and somewhere along the way, I didn't see any of the red flags. And I think that's where I'm trying to go with my story on this one is just red flags, right? Like, and that's one of the things that I've become really good at picking up now is red flags. And this girl was just like an absolute party animal, which is totally cool. Like, whatever, I think there's partying, and then there's like, you know, there's like Charlie Sheen partying, and she was the latter. And it was very much just like excessive alcohol, crazy amounts of drugs, you know, batshit crazy, super hot. But, you know, I didn't see any of these red flags. You know, the fact that she had a super hedonistic lifestyle, that she lived just a really crazy sort of wild existence. And I tried to make her a girlfriend. I tried to have something serious with her. And that was one of the biggest lessons I learned is, man, like, you might meet a pretty girl and she might be really fun, but if there's a ton of red flags, like, don't try to make that girl your girlfriend. Like, because she's probably just not ready for it. She's not at the stage of her life where she's ready to invite that kind of stable energy into her life. And for me as well, you look at how like our little fling started with her being in a stable relationship, me coming along, sweeping her off her feet, you know, and then me trying to make her a stable girlfriend. Like, and that's just, you know, that shit just doesn't work, right? And so I know there's like these memes floating around right now where it's like, you know, she belongs to the streets or whatever, but it's like, dude, sometimes she belongs to the streets, man. Like, and you can't try to like make that girl, you know, wifey material, because maybe she's not ready for it now. Maybe she'll never be ready for it, right? But it's like, that's something that I had to learn the hard way. Is like, you know, is fit and form. There's two different things, right? Fit is whether or not she is a good fit for me, and form is how hot does she look. And I used to just go all form. I used to just look at it and just be like, hey, is she hot? And does she like me? And that was my bar. And that was a really bad way to approach relationships, because I didn't look at values, I didn't look at morals, I didn't look at how does this person think and view the world. I just literally looked at it and went, she's hot and I think she likes me. We should try to make something work. And that was disastrous. Sounds
like a very interesting lessons learned. I mean, I think there's a couple of things that you said that really sort of struck a chord with me. The first thing I think you mentioned was around values, right? And also red flags. I think as a guy, when you first start dating, when you're very young, all you're doing is just chasing after sex, because all you want is that physical intimacy. Because when you're young, you don't really think about stuff like values. You know, you don't really think about what are the bad signals or bad signs that this person is not the right person for me. The red flags, essentially, these are like, these are things that these are like qualities or traits or things that, from your perspective, are not a good trait and not something that you look for in a female partner, like for a relationship wise. I think obviously there are some guys out there who would love a chick like that. Probably they're into open relationships, or maybe they're into like swinging or whatever. Like there are people or men out there who would be okay with that. I think that's a very important point I just want to make, is that one person's red flag might be another person's green flag. So that's one thing. The other thing that really also struck home was that as I said earlier, right, the guys start off looking for physical intimacy, but over time they learn to develop a sense of like, this is the things that I want. These are the qualities, values, principles that I look for in an ideal woman. I think if most men started off doing this like very early on, I think they would have had a very good or much better life. Like I can relate to my family, for example, right? My parents, before they got divorced, like I always thought to myself, both my parents had very different sets of values. They had slightly different personalities. It was a little bit like oil and fire, or at least it was like they're like kind of opposites in some ways. So I always thought to myself, if they hadn't gotten married, they probably would have been in like happy relationships with two other different people. I might have never been born, which is, I'm sure, a loss to the world. But fundamentally, I think they would have probably been happier in their own separate relationships with someone that aligns with their values, their traits, their personalities. So I think that's the key thing. I think it's not necessarily about who's right and wrong. It's about getting the right fit, as you said, right? It's about finding the right person, connecting the right fit. What else? So let's move on to my third story for the night, and this will be the third and final one. So this one, fast forward another year or two. I'm now 23 and a half, around that time. I got on a date with this friend's friend. She's an Indian chick. In fact, all three are Indian. I think I'm always chasing after a brown guy. Just can't help it, mate. Just can't help it. I like me some Desi. That's a shitty joke. Anyways, what I was saying, yeah. So this chick, this this date that I was going on when I was 23, we caught up. At this point, what had happened was, I'd gotten a little bit better shape. I had like a pretty decent haircut. I'd taken her out to a date. We'd gone to like Parramatta, if you're familiar with the suburbs in Sydney. We'd gone to Parramatta. We were about to go to the cinemas, and we watched the movie and then we came back out. And during that night, we had a conversation about what people were looking for, like what she was looking for and what I was looking for. And this was technically a date, or at least we both sort of knew it was sort of a date. And in that conversation, I sort of said, I'm not looking for anything serious. I'm looking for something casual. And that is not a...
Should have lied, bro. Should have lied.
Yeah, I should have. I think
Don't lie about that. I'm kidding.
No. I think I should have lied in that I shouldn't have said like so explicitly what I wanted to say. Like I should have been a little bit more indirect. That's what I meant. Like I think if you are looking for something casual, it's fine. Like obviously, but I think there's a way to phrase it. That's what I meant. Like the messaging, the way you frame that information is very important. And I framed it as though I was just a guy looking to get laid. And I think I could have framed it as, look, I'm just, looking to have fun and meet new people. I could have said that just for example. Yep. But by being very explicit and direct to the point where, as a guy, it's like I was communicating to another guy. Like I didn't quite understand at that point how to communicate to a woman exactly. So over the course of that night, I asked her questions. I had a bunch of conversations with her. But again, like I distinctly remember this specific moment where she said, "What are you looking for in a relationship, or what are you looking for at the moment?" And I said, I'm looking for something casual, just like fun, just like sex. And I think that directness, that actually probably scared her off. So we never got to have a second date and so on. And I always remember that moment. I always think to myself, had I been a little bit more delicate with my words, maybe, something could have happened. Maybe she was also looking for something casual. I'm not sure. But by being so direct, I think probably would have, given off the wrong vibe that I was just a horny, guy looking to get laid. And so I think since that point, like ever since that point, I've always been more cautious with my words and a little bit more. I've understood, like, if you're going to communicate the right way, but also get the wording, messaging right. It's not just the key point you're trying to make, it's how you come across, especially with women. Like with guys, you can just look at a guy and just tell him directly, like whatever you're thinking and feeling sometimes. But like with a girl, it's like the words you choose, the way you message will make a big difference.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your third story, mate?
Yeah, dude, I think that's a really good point, man. And it's like, it's one of those things where, like, because I'm in sales, and you're in sales as well. And it's one of those things where if, you're speaking to a prospective, business buyer, and you just tell them, hey, I'm here to sell you stuff, right? But the same way you could rephrase that and say, I'm here to have a conversation with you to see if we can find some genuine challenges. And if there is, explore some potential alignment and work towards a partnership. Yeah. I know that someone listening to this would be like, you two are so full of shit, but like, I think delivery of a message is really important. And I think that's a good shout, right? And I think, I think what you were trying to get to is, hey, like, I'm not quite ready to... I don't believe I'm quite ready to commit to a relationship yet. However, if the right person comes along, maybe. But if nothing, I'd like to get to know you a little bit better, and I'd like to obviously show you a little bit more about myself and see where that goes.
If only I'd met you earlier, Joe. Fuck. If only I had this wisdom earlier. Why weren't you there 3-4 years ago?
Mate, I'm out here practicing these lines. I'm practicing in the mirror. No, but all right. So I guess my story goes back about 4 years now, 3 to 4 years. I was, fast forward, I was about 23 going on 24 at the time. And I met someone through a friend. So she was a friend of a friend. And, I was single, she was single, she'd just come out of a relationship. And so she'd invited me through to a party at her house. I went over and, we had a really fun night. I met some of her friends. And it was pretty clear from the outset, like she was very into me. I was somewhat into her. I mean, she was pretty, but again, I think it was just the fact that she was into me was enough for me to be, excited about it. And, fast forward end of the party, I stayed over, and that turned into like me being there basically for like 3 days. I'm pretty sure I like called in sick on Monday just so we could like stay in bed together and just, And it was so... It was quick, it was wild, and it just sort of happened out of the blue. And, fast forward about a week, we were basically a thing. Like we were in a relationship. We were exclusive, I guess. And one of the things that I took away from that entire experience, and by the way, we dated for like about almost a year. I'd say about 9 months, maybe about a year. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I took away from that experience was like not just letting a relationship happen. Like I literally just let the relationship happen. It was like, I met you, we had sex, we had some more sex, and then a week later we decided that we were just going to exclusively keep having sex with each other, and also we'd also do these coupley things. And that was it. Like that was the courtship, right? And, one of the big things that I'd sort of learnt from that was, again, like there was no thought process into evaluating a potential partner. I didn't sit down and ask myself questions like, is she the right fit? Am I ready? Am I at a place in my life where I'm ready to invite this person in? What is she looking for? What am I looking for? When was her last relationship? How did that end? When was my last relationship? Does she know how mine one ended? Like, where are my weak points? What are her weak points? Like, I mean, we literally just sort of threw ourselves into it and then tried to make it work, and that was just a huge, like, again, a huge sort of lesson for me later in life was just, being really conscious about when a relationship happens and actually making it a choice. And I know some people are probably thinking about this or listening to this and thinking, what do you mean? Like, you know, how do you not consciously choose to be in a relationship? How do you just let a relationship happen? And I think a lot of people can relate to that, where it's like you meet someone, you hang out a bunch of times, and before you know it, you're kind of a thing. But there was no real, you know, was there really a conversation had? Was there, you know, what was the process that sort of led you up to the point where you decided, you know, you're going to be in a relationship with this person? And so that was a huge lesson for me that now I apply a lot, which is really just having the conversation with myself and asking myself the question, what is going on here? Like, I've seen this person 5 times, or I've been on 7 different dates with this person. It's really fun, but what are we? Like, and what do I want? What do they want? And do we continue on? Do we have a conversation about having something serious, or do we break it off? Like, really making it conscious.
Yeah. Cool. I mean, it sounds like physical intimacy that just transformed into like an emotional / physical relationship. Like it's just transformed into a relationship, and with that being like the whole sort of experience, do you now have like a step-by-step process, or do you now know, like, you know, after 3 dates or after 7 dates, like how do you normally, I guess, transform some, like what's the process now to essentially for something to become a relationship or not to become a relationship now?
Dude, it's tough to have a process around it, but I get what you're saying, which is like, what is the thought process, right? And it's like, I'm more conscious of what's happening. So my process now is to have the conversation with myself. So I guess if I'm seeing someone right now, right? And we went on 2 dates and it's really fun, and she's a really cool person. However, like, I'm not flying blind, and we've both had the conversation around what we both want. And so I think that communication is really important, but then also communicating with myself, right? And so the moment I feel like, you know, the moment I have to sort of like check myself and say, hey, you know, what's actually going on here? And that's really important, I feel, as guys to do. Is to have that conversation with ourselves, not to be in that sort of scarcity mindset where it's like, oh my God, yes, this girl likes me and she wants to hang out with me. And, you know, I guess we're just going to quickly dive into a relationship now. We're just going to be boyfriend and girlfriend. And I think it's important to slow things down, pull back and say, hey, is this right? Am I at the right place in my life? Am I ready to bring someone into my life? You know, can I commit, you know, to actually ask those questions and have that conversation. So that's the process. It's not like a, you know, on date number 3, you know, or date number 5. It could be date number 1, right? But it's to have that conversation with myself.
It's knowing exactly what you're looking for and having that awareness of that, and obviously thinking through, not just going with the ride, I guess. Wow. So I think this has been a interesting episode, right? We've shared about 3 stories each, and we've discussed how, you know, like what it's like, I guess, dating and growing up in, you know, in Sydney, Australia, and seeing that sort of experience. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to summarize some of the key takeaways from today's episode, and then we'll get cracking. So I think some of the key takeaways from my story is, the first one was just around understanding, you know, like understanding how do you indicate sexual interest and indicate, you know, your clarity of intent when it comes to women, and avoiding that sort of friend zone phase. A lot of it, as a guy, you're responsible for avoiding that friend zone. If you get trapped in the friend zone, it's probably your fault. That's number 1. And number 2 was like knowing that if you are, you know, if there's a girl out there and she's in a relationship with someone, and you know, 2 things. First is like avoid that, and even if there is sexual chemistry, you know, like there's so many women in the world that you know you could choose from, and if things are meant to be, like maybe they'll break up and maybe something will happen down the road, but you know, just for your own personal integrity and own personal you know, like mental peace, it's just better not to take on that guilt and just avoid interacting with women that are, you know, in a serious relationship or with someone else. And also the second point on that was that never discount yourself, never self-deprecate yourself, and never, shit all over yourself. If you know, if you have insecurities and you're trying to work on it, that's fine. But when you're in a relation, or when you're interacting with women, or in public, just don't, you know, discount yourself. Don't shit all over yourself. Yeah. And the final story, I think, for me, final lesson, I guess, is just making sure that when you are interacting with women or on dates, you know, make sure your messaging, your wording, you know, how you're essentially phrasing things is very important. Don't just be direct as a guy and just directly, you know, say what you think. You know, take 2 seconds to think. Don't just blurt out whatever's on your mind. Those are some of the key takeaways for today from me. What about you, Joe?
Yeah, dude. You know, number one is just red flags.
Yeah.
For me, right? Is look out for those red flags, man, and don't kid yourself. You know, and I did that so many times where I just kid myself. You know, but if there's a red flag there, if it's someone that has, you know, doesn't have their life together quite as much as you'd like, you know, maybe they have a lot of vices in their life, maybe they're just really off the rails, and you know, I'm someone that values health and spiritual health and mental health and physical health, so I can't have an off the rails lifestyle to maintain, you know, my values in that department. So just keeping my eyes out for those red flags. Yeah, and that last one, dude, is just, you know, consciously making a decision to get into a relationship, not just letting relationships happen, because they're relationships require serious commitment from a time perspective, from an energy perspective. You're literally pouring your soul into something. And you know, the mistakes that I've made was just letting them happen, you know, and over the course of whatever time frame, is just saying, hey, we're now a thing, or not even having the conversation.
Yeah.
And actually having, what's really important is to have the conversation with myself and ask myself the question, am I ready? You know, is this right? Is this person right? Let's be honest. And if they're not right, you know, to be honest about that as well. And sometimes, you know, I think it helps to just say, hey, I really like this person, and I think we're heading in some sort of trajectory where it looks like it's a relationship, but I'm going to just wait a little bit more and gather some more information, understand this person a little bit better, and take an educated call. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to force yourself into a decision. But those are my key things.
And what was the book you recommended?
So Abhi just asked, basically just said, what was the book that I recommended? So a couple of books, I'd say. Why Women Have Sex. Read it. It's a fucking good book. And I guess for anyone that's in a relationship at the moment, there is a very good book called The Tactical Guide to Women. That's The Tactical Guide to Women by Shawn T. Smith. You can get both of those on Audible. But those 2 books have been pretty invaluable in just understanding relationships and psychology, of how women think, how they make decisions, why they choose to be with you, why they choose mates, how they choose mates, just so, you know, a bit more informed. Yeah.
Oh, I'll also make a quick recommendation then. That's 2 good books, and I'll probably check it out myself. But my recommendation for a book would be Models by Mark Manson. This is a really good book. Mark Manson's early work, he talked about essentially how to be an authentic, genuine guy, and how to attract, you know, people, and you know, how to essentially be a good version of yourself when it comes to getting into relationships and meeting people. It's not just it's not one of those books where it's like full of pickup artists or that stuff. It's more about being a good version of yourself. And I'll put all these you know, the names of all these books and the links in the podcast episode show notes. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it in terms of this episode today. So yeah, this is our first episode, the Desi Guys. We're essentially, from now on, every Sunday we'll upload an episode where we talk about just the brown perspective in a white man's world. I think that's a good way to end it, right? Cool.
Over and out.